Hello guys, today we'll see how we can exchange data from FTP server to a Business Central SaaS version. Whereas in Business Central on-premises version, we can exchange FTP server data very easily because on-premise Business Central we can have an access for the local resource. We can directly fetch it from the local resource. Whereas for a SaaS version, we don't have a permission for local resource. So for that, whenever user put some files or insert some files on FTP server, we have to read it to Azure Logic Apps and Azure Blob Storage, that we will see in a moment. So that is one of the way for reading or writing a file from FTP into Business Central SaaS version. We will say how we can do that. So basically, whenever user uh, puts or insert any files on FTP server, we have to build a logic app. That logic app will look for files on FTP server and moves those files to blob storage, Azure Blob Storage. From the Azure Blob Storage, we have to write a code to fetch that data into Business Central. Either we can directly save the data into Business Central, or we can have one more extra step to parse the data into um, Azure functions, so that later we can store that data into Business Central. For simplicity purpose, we will not use Azure functions. From blob storage, we will read it into Business Central. This is for importing of a file. Whereas for exporting, uh, it's a it's exactly reverse of it. So Business Central, we will process the data and save the data into Azure Blob Storage, and from Azure Blob Storage, the logic app, we need a one more logic app which will take the files from the blob storage and place them into FTP server. This is the way we can exchange the files between FTP and Business Central online version. Before going for the blob storage or logic apps, first we will see what is Azure storage account. So Azure storage account, these are all the family of it. Azure Blob, Azure Table, Azure Files, Azure Queues and Disks. So we will talk about Azure Blobs today, um, where we will store data in a secured way and unstructured way. Means whatever the files we will store on the Azure Blobs, it will consider as a blob. Okay, and we'll see how we can create that blob. Basically, for creation of Azure blobs, we need a storage account. First, we need storage account. Inside each storage account, we will have a containers. Containers. It might be multiple containers, and each container will have a blobs. For example, I have created a storage account called storage FTPBC, which will have two containers. One is for import container and one is for export container. You can ask why we are creating a two containers, because um, whenever the client or whenever the user places a file, we can ask them to place a files in this container, which is import container. Whenever we export the data, we will export into this container, export container. So, basically to distinguish the data or the distinguish the files. So we will have a two container. Um, each container will have files or a blobs. For example, in our scenarios, I'm using for CSV file for importing and exporting an XML files. Exporting into export container and importing from import container. The next one is how we can set up a storage account and containers. So we need to log into Azure Blobs, portal, Azure portal.azure.com, and search for a storage account. You will get this one, storage account. Click on it and create a new storage account. and select a resource group. If you don't have a resource group, just create a new one and enter a storage account name. In our case, it is storage account FTP BC. It must be in a small lowercase and region, and select a respective performance and redundancy. And once you fill everything, just click on review and create, and review the details, and just click on create. Now we have created a storage account, so click on go to resource. Now we are in the storage account overview page. So in this you can create a click on containers, click on new container or plus symbol here, and enter a container name. For example, I'm creating a new container which is import container, so I'll name it as import container and I'll click on create. So once container is ready, we can see it here. The same way you can create an export container as well, or I'll show you in my demo how. Suppose while exporting a container, I'll see if there is no container exist here. Suppose I'll not create an export container. While exporting my sales order transaction, it should create a container. If it doesn't exist, then it should place a blob inside that container. We will see that in the demo. So this is how we can create a storage account and a container. So the next important step is, click on the access keys in storage account. Click on the access keys and we will have a show keys. Click on that and you can copy these keys. So just copy this value. We will use it in the our coding while retrieving the files or while exporting the files. Let's see how we can see in the demo. Now I'm in portal.azure.com, so I'll just go for storage storage accounts, and you can see there are two storage accounts with me now, FTP and BC. This is what which I created it, and you can see inside you can have two container. One is for import and one is for export. For example, let me delete this export container. So I have only one import container, so user has to place a file here. So we have to build a logic app which will export this CSV file into uh, sorry sorry, and we have to build a logic app which will take a file from the FTP server and place it into this container, yeah, as in the blob. So this is our blob storage. We will read this blob into business central, and the same way we will export our data into export container, which we don't have as of now. So while exporting it, we will see whether it will create a new container or not. Let's go to client. I've created an on the customer list. I've created a three actions. One is for importing from the Azure Blob storage, export to Azure Blob storage, and get container list. So we will see how it works. So whenever I say import, it will import items into item table. For example, I'll go back and we'll see whether we have those items or not. So for example, which items I'm importing into item.csv. This is what the file which I placed over there, and this is item number, item uh, description. Suppose table. I'll search for a table. We don't have a table, so what we'll do, we'll import a file from the blob storage and we'll see whether it's imported or not. Import from Azure Blob storage. Items are imported from blob storage. I got a message, so I'll go back to items, and I can see, yes, I can see there is an 5 items got imported from the blob storage. So if you go see, I have a 5 items from there. I can import it. These are all inventory, so I'm not importing these values. We will see the code whatever I used. The next one is exporting details to blob storage, which means that in my case, when I click on export to export sales transaction details, it should create an export container here. So we'll go back to this one, go back to customer list, and we have export to Azure Blob Storage. What it is doing, what coding which I did is exporting the all the sales order details, means including lines, to as an XML to Azure Blob Storage. So in this action, it will see whether the container is there or not. If not, it will export details. Sorry, export. It will create a container and it will export a sales order transaction. It says that file sales orders underscore today name dot xml is created on Azure Blob Storage. So we'll see that. We'll just say refresh. So it created an export container and it placed a file called sales order underscore today's name dot xml. So if you click on it and if you you can see the details of the Azure Blob. So you can download it or you can do whatever you can do it from here. So only thing is from business central side we will read it from the blob storage and we will write it to blob storage. So apart from these two, it's Azure Logic Apps work, which will take a file from blob storage and place it into FTP, or take it from file from FTP and place it into blob storage, vice versa. We'll see what code which I written for exporting and importing from the Azure Blob Storage. So if I go to customer list, I have one more function. We will see that and get a container list. So it will go through the containers of the particular storage account. I can see that there is a one container called export container and another one called import container. So now there are two containers. So now we have we will see what code which we written. So I have an action for importing. Go to definition, read a file from the Azure Blob Storage. So I have created a code in it. It will read file from the blob storage and get me an in stream. So I use that in stream and using a CSV buffer, I'll just init the item and inserting that item back, and I'm showing the message. So main coding is for us is this one. You read a file from the blob storage. This is a function. What this will do is we have storage authorization, which is coordinate called storage service authorization. We have a function called create shared key. We have to provide a key which we copied while creating a storage account. The same key we have to provide it here as our text, and it will return as an interface called storage service authorization. So then after that we have to initialize our container. So this is our storage account and this is our container, and authorization we have to pass the authorization what we fetch in the previous step. So blob client is a coordinate which is ABS blob client. ABS in the sense Azure Blob Storage. We have multiple coordinates and the records for related to Azure Blob Storage. These are all that as a sample which we are using it. So blob client dot initialize by passing these details and list the blobs, which are all the blobs available there. It will list down in this container. Okay, so for example we have only one now, items.csv, so it will loop through that number of blobs and it will read blob as a string. Now I know that I know that the client will place a CSV file, so I'll just read them as in stream, and I'm passing that in stream back to uh, passing that in stream back to uh, caller function. So here in this case we can do other multiple ways, which is this one, get blob text, so which we can get a blob as a text or blob as a file. We have other functionality which we can use it. The same way goes for export. Export will call for this one, which is this action. I'm just forming an XML file here by using an XML buffer. Then after that, I'm just saving that XML into InStream, and Azure Blob Storage. I'm calling this function to export files to Azure Blob Storage. What it will does is it will same it does in create a shared key by I'm getting an authorization back. By using authorization, I'm initializing the storage account. Here I'm checking whether the export container is exist or not. If it not exist, then it will create that container. Okay, so then if it's already exists, it won't do anything, so it will just fetch the details of export container, and it will, in the next step, we are initializing the same export container here. And just put the blob. This is a function where we will store, or where we will create our blob by passing this in stream. So which means that I am getting an in stream from this coordinate, which is where it created an XML, and I'm passing that XML document into in stream, and I'm passing the file name, which is this one in this my case. So I'm passing this file name and in stream to Azure Blob Storage. So it will create that in the particular storage account on particular container. We have other functionality called put blob, append blob text, which means we can place a text value. In this case, I'm placing a stream, which means placing a XML file, or some cases we can place a text file also. So once it does, so I'm just passing the I'm just showing the message. So notice here is we are calling the Azure Blob Storage coordinates or functionalities, which means that we are sending a HTTP request to Azure Blob Storage, where I can see, I cannot see it here, right? So where we have a uh, we have a coordinates called Azure Blob Storage related coordinates, where we are sending a request and the responses in a HTTP format. If you go through these coordinates, we can see um, how we are sending a request and the responses, which means in the related set of coordinates, if you go and see, we can see how we are sending a request and the responses. So in our cases, I'm just reading that responses. If it is successful, then only I'm showing this message. If not successful, then I'm showing an error message. So basically, while interacting with Azure Blob Storage, uh, we are sending a request to Blob Storage, and we are getting the responses. So apart from that, okay. So this is all about Azure Blob Storage and Business Central. Now we'll see how we can call logic apps, or we can create a logic apps. So logic app means for FTP to PC, which is uh, uh, reading a file from FTP. So just search for the logic apps, click on logic apps and add new logic app. Same way, create a resource group if not exist. Add a new logic app name and take consumption and click on review and create it. Go to resource, logic app designer. Whenever we are creating a logic apps, it will open up logic app designer. If not, click on logic app designer, click on blank logic app, or we have an FTP related already template is there, you can use it. I'm going with the blank one and search for the FTP. When a file is added or modified, this is a trigger. Select this trigger and add all the details of the FTP connections. So once you add everything and click on FTP, it says that once it's connected to FTP server, we can see that connected to FTP BC. And here you select a folder, in which FTP folder they place, once they place a file, so it should trigger. So how often do you want to check for items? So for example, every 3 minutes logic app will run, and it will check whether for the new file exists or not. So for every 3 minutes, or you can set whatever the uh, time interval you want, you can set it here and click on new step. In this step, choose again an FTP, and in that actions get a file metadata, whatever the file which they place on FTP, get that file metadata and get the list of file IDs from that. Then there's an action, then go for one more trigger which is same FTP, and get, in this case, in this step we will get the file content as an ID of the file content. We will fetch it in this case. And next one is click on Azure Blob storage, create a blob, and provide on blob storage details here, and the access key which we copied in the while creating an Azure storage account. Just click on create. Then you can see that whether the connection is established, and select the same storage account and folder path. If you have multiple containers, for import container you select a folder which is for importing, and the blob name is path and the file content. So that's it. What it does is just save the logic app. So now our logic app is ready. Logic app is like a job queue in our business center. It will keep on look for a particular file on a particular folder, whatever we did a trigger and action. So it works based on the trigger and actions. In our case, trigger is when a file is added or modified. So what action needs to be performed, we did it. So it is based on the uh, uh, actions or the result of the previous step. If any one of the step is failed, it won't execute the next steps. So this is one logic app which is copying a file from FTP to blob storage. So from once the file is available in the blob storage, Business Central will read that file from the blob storage. That's it. The next one is, we will see how we can create one more logic app which we can place a file on a blob storage, and from blob storage logic app will take the file and place it into FTP folder. So for that, trigger is when a file is added and modified on the Azure Blob Storage. So to start from Azure Blob Storage, this is a new logic app. I'm creating it, logic app BC2 FTP. So in this case, I'm just placing the file into export container, which is where we have placed our files, or where we have exported our files into. The next one is the same thing. How often do we need to check? Then click on next steps. In the Azure Blob Storage, this is my action, sorry, trigger, and get blob content using path. Select this one, and the list of file path you selected, and before that you have to select a storage account name. And once file content is ready, then create a file in FTP. This is an action on FTP side. So click on this and click on the folder where do you want to store in FTP, and list of files as a display name, that is a file name, whatever there, whatever we got it in the previous step, which is content, and the file content of it, and that's it. So just save it. Now our both the logic ops are ready. Whenever the file they placed on FTP, it will come to blob storage. Whenever we exported a file to blob storage, it will move that file into FTP. That's it, guys. Thank you.